Matt Damon is a new film by Ridley Scott. It stars The Martian and Jessica Chastain as Matt Damon. Now, before I say anything, I would just like to say, don't watch the trailer because it spoils a lot. I, for one, have never watched it because I never watch trailers unless they're impossible to avoid, because I prefer not to know anything about a film before I watch it. I'd rather walk into a film with fresh eyes and no expectations at all. Plus, most trailers lie. Anyway, back on topic. The Martian is a solid movie. It was pretty much perfectly executed in almost every way. The effects are great, that goes without saying. Nothing ever feels fake, despite most of the movie being set in either space or on Mars. Some effects toward the end of the film are a little odd looking, but nothing too noticeable. The cast is pretty incredible in this. You've most likely seen every cast member in something else before, and they all do a terrific job, including and especially Matt Damon. Matt Damon really carries this movie. In most movies, astronauts are either really boring, emotionless nerds, or witty, over-the-top caricatures. Matt Damon manages to have a perfect mix of the two. He's enough of a movie-ish scientist to be interesting and fun to watch, but also manages to be very competent and clever, like a real scientist. He's one of the main reasons this movie works as well as it does. If I were to compare this to the last big space movies that came out the past few years, like Gravity and Interstellar, I would say this movie is much better. That's mainly due to Matt Damon's performance. Sandra Bullock in Gravity is very bleh. And Matthew McConaughey in Interstellar is very bleh.
No, 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 no.
Not to say they're bad actors, but their characters weren't well written, and their portrayal of their characters wasn't stellar. Would I say The Martian is better than Gravity and Interstellar? Absolutely. However, The Martian isn't as ambitious as those two movies. Gravity and Interstellar were certainly groundbreaking, and were trying new things. Things films had never really done before. Those films, Interstellar in particular, suffer from being too ambitious and falling flat on their face. But I admire those films for trying something new, even if it didn't always work. The Martian is very familiar. It's essentially Castaway in space. We've seen space in film before, we've seen rescue missions in space before, we've seen this plot and story structure before, we've seen a Ridley Scott sci-fi film before. Does that make this a bad movie? Absolutely not. That's because the execution is almost flawless. The building of tension, the effects, the use of music, every aspect of the film was so meticulously crafted you can't help but admire it. It's near perfect filmmaking, and it's what Ridley Scott does best. The movie doesn't aim high, but it gets everything just right, and that's gotta count for something. It's not a heavy science fiction film either. It's pretty straightforward, and there's a lot of levity in it. More than I expected. I would consider it more of a thriller than a science fiction movie. There isn't even much fiction in it. Most of it's fairly grounded. Of course, we haven't gone to Mars yet, and the ships depicted in the film don't actually exist, but for the most part, it's accurate to how space really is. I'm not a scientist, so I don't know for sure. I thought Gravity and Interstellar were accurate until scientists ripped those movies to fucking shit, but nothing really bothered me. It's a movie, it's movie logic, I don't really care. Is there anything wrong with this movie? Other than the fact that it isn't a masterpiece? Not really. If I were to nitpick, some stuff was a little predictable. For some reason, the astronauts had GoPros attached to their suits that produced flawless 8K video for some reason. But hey, it's the future. Maybe they have 8K GoPros in the future. Who knows? I wish there was a more clever way to introduce all the characters in the film. Basically, whenever a character pops up, a title card appears with their name and what they do. I don't know how they'd fix this problem, but again, the movie doesn't really care about those things. It's efficient. Here's a guy and what he does. Here's where we are. Here's what day it is. Move on. While this movie pretty much takes place on Mars for the most part, it does cut back to Earth, and in another movie that would really bother me. In Interstellar, it really bothered me. Because here I am in space, really interested in what's going on, and then we cut back to Jessica Chastain on Earth, and I don't really care. Cutting back to Earth in this movie is almost crucial. It gives Matt Damon's situation weight, it adds context to the film, and it adds stakes. Like, if Matt Damon doesn't make it, it's gonna be a major tragedy. The Martian is a very well-made movie with tons of good performances and visuals. I highly recommend it, even if it isn't a brilliant science fiction film. I give it an 85%, and that's high for me. Be proud, Ridley. And please, don't make, like, Robin Hood movies anymore. Stick to what you do best. Especially scenes of people taking some kind of object out of their stomach. You do that best. Almost every movie you make has a character, like, getting stabbed in the stomach or taking something out of their stomach. I think you have a fetish.